Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 6th installment of the L.K. Evans Pioneer History of Greene County, Pennsylvania Book Reading Club. This week we read about several different things, to include some early families and some Revolutionary War information, and I think that has kind of brought us full circle. Over the past several weeks we've been able to learn things about the very first inhabitants of Greene County, how people like John Minor and the Swan, Hughes, and Van Meter families very, very early on in the 1760s braved the wilderness, trekked from places as far away as Virginia, New Jersey, Maryland, in some cases even Connecticut, and parts all over the eastern seaboard to settle in this region. And I think we've gotten a very good picture of how difficult those times were. Not only was this area entirely uninhabited by European settlers, but as we've learned that at times our relationship with the Native Americans in this area was not always the best. And whether those unsuccessful relationships were a result of a few rogue settlers or unnecessary interference between the colonial and even early federal governments in this area. So we see that building up to the American Revolution times were already getting tough. Indian massacres were commonplace, and really the Indian massacres sort of became part of the American Revolutionary War. In fact, many historians have often wanted to cite the Battle of Point Pleasant in, I believe it was 1774, and the attack on Chief Cornstalk and his family as the true beginning of the American Revolution. I guess it all stands on where you're at and what perspective you're looking from, but these two things, the Indian Wars and the Revolutionary War, very much became the same thing here in Greene County, Pennsylvania. I think we've seen, not only in this video series, but in the clips I included in past videos from our In Their Words video, how many of the Revolutionary War soldiers here were protecting the early settlers from Indian attacks. We've also seen in our book how there were Tories in Greene County and how some folks here actually supported us staying with Great Britain during the American Revolution. So things were very, very complex then. It's often the case when we look back on the past to simplify it and make things black and white, but certainly that was not the case here or anywhere else for that matter. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small little events that happen that are all part of the narrative of history. And understanding history in the greater sense goes hand in hand with understanding these small events, and that's a lot of what we see in the pioneer history of Greene County, Pennsylvania. Again, our early settlers, they were tough folks. And another thing that we tend to see throughout the course of these videos, though it's not necessarily articulated in such a way, there's always the undercurrent of it, is how this region was very much isolated from the rest of Pennsylvania and really the rest of the country at that time as a whole. The Allegheny Mountains to our east and the vast open area to our west left us as a little sliver of land that for much of our early history we were very much on our own. Very, very interesting. In fact, that's part of the reason why many people settled here. They were further away from the strict regulations and sometimes unfair religious practices that actually were part of the reason why this country was founded in the first place. So people were crossing the mountains and coming here so that they could experience true freedom as they understood the definition, and that's very much part of our legacy today. And back to the isolation, in modern times most people tend to poke fun at the way the older residents from Greene County and really the whole region speak, but I think it's important to realize that that's actually a holdback from our English roots. What most would refer to as redneck speech actually is a form of Elizabethan English that was derived in England in Tudor times in the 15th and 16th centuries, and due to the isolation here, the geographical isolation here, a lot of the folks really up until the current time still use some of those phrases. Like to rent up a house is something that you'll find in Shakespeare. The term cuz, in referring to a family member, also found in Shakespeare. Really interesting to sit and read Shakespeare, but when doing so, read it with a Western Pennsylvania and Northern Appalachian accent, and it makes a lot more sense when we view it in that context than, just reading it word for word out of a book. Very, very interesting things. That's something I find I like to talk about a lot, is how our language patterns really have key elements that date back several centuries, even before the discovery and permanent settlement of this continent. So be proud of who you are and where you come from. Greene County is a wonderful place. Wonderful place. So next week is actually going to be our 7th and final installment of this book club. We've gone through nearly every section of the book, and our last sections will be on page 156, which extensively talks about Waynesburg College, now Waynesburg University. They have played a pivotal role in our life here in Greene County, even if you didn't attend the school yourself. They're very much a positive part of our community. We'll also be looking on page 164 at Greene County's military record. Again, another point of pride for us in Greene County. And lastly, we'll be looking at page 172 at the early merchants of Waynesburg. And one of the things we'll be discussing in our next video is about one of those early merchants, whose name was William Rhodes. Very interesting character. In fact, at times he is even called a pirate. So come back next week. Check us out for that. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.